And then, of course, I went to Burma in 1985 to do those practices intensively in a systematic way. I'd always done them before, since I began practice actually, but for an hour here or there, or somewhat sporadically. Or when we moved into the center in Barrie, that first month, we had no programs, so those of us who were there said we were going to sit for a month, and I decided, okay, I'll do loving kindness intensively then, or I'll do the Brahma Viharas then, but something happened to a friend of ours after a week, so several of us had to leave, and I never really got beyond loving kindness for myself, and which didn't, that's a whole story too, but it was only when I went to Burma in 1985 that I really got the kind of systematic, intensive, guided exposure to these 4 states. And I came to realize, like, oh, isn't that interesting? In some ways, equanimity is like the ground out of which the others arise. And in some schools of Tibetan Buddhism, you actually practice equanimity first. And then you go on to do loving kindness. And I guess in some way in this tradition, we do a version of that, because many people who, not everyone though, many people who are doing loving kindness practice have some background in doing mindfulness practice, which is, we spent the morning discussing, has like a key component of equanimity, and balance. And so they bring that wisdom into their loving kindness practice. I did these practices very intensively in Burma in 1985, and then I came back to the States and I began teaching, and it never occurred to me that there would be people signing up for metta retreats, for loving kindness retreats, who'd never done mindfulness before. But because there was no prerequisite for those retreats, people started appearing, and for some number of them, loving kindness was their very first meditation practice. So I thought, look at that. I've just created a new genre of meditator, and so I could see why one would talk about equanimity to begin with. Because each of these states is said to have what in the Buddhist psychology is a near and far enemy. The far enemy is the clear opposite. You would never ever confuse that for the state of the Brahma Vihara. Whereas the near enemy is something that's kind of close enough, so you could get really confused. But if we look more deeply, we can see, oh, that's very different. That's really different. So the far enemy of loving kindness is aversion, which is anger and fear. And in the Buddhist psychology, those are the same states, anger and fear. They're just 2 different forms. Anger, the energized, outflowing form. Fear, the more held in, frozen form of striking out against what's happening, trying to declare it to be untrue. This is why it's often said that the practice of loving kindness is the antidote to fear, because it will work in that way. The near enemy of loving kindness is attachment. And attachment in this sense doesn't mean the nice way we use it in Western psychology, bonding and nurturing and good attachment relationships and all of that. It really means some sense of grasping, of narrowing our sense of happiness to something that's going to involve some kind of control. Now, obviously, we want things to be a certain way. That's just natural. But if that becomes the basis for honoring connection or caring in an ongoing way, clearly we're sunk. because we don't always get what we want in the time frame we want it, right? So whereas attachment and loving kindness can often be confused with one another, they're really not the same thing. With a hefty dose of attachment, loving kindness, which is metta in the Pali language, metta becomes what a friend of mine once referred to as metta with an edge. Like, may you be happy by Tuesday. I've got a long list of people I want to have happy, and I'll give you till Tuesday, may you be happy in precisely this way. This is the way you need to change to get happy. So maybe there's a lot of good stuff in there and real caring, but it starts to get interlaced with, I need it on this timetable. It has to look exactly like this. I need you to listen to me. So one of the closest equivalents is generosity, is the practice of generosity, because practices like loving kindness are said to be practices of generosity. They may not be material generosity, but they're like generosity of the spirit. And we know there are like so many ways we can give something, right? Same object, but so many places it could be coming from. And that's one reason why the motive, the intention in Buddhist teaching is considered very, very important. It's a very important part of an action. Something we do, something we say, something we refrain from saying. So, let's see. Need a prop. So in kind of ordinary Western ways of thinking, and thank you for my snacks, by the way. In ordinary Western ways of thinking, we say more things like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions and things like that, But in Eastern psychology, the intention, the motivation behind an action is considered very, very important. So I might reach down and pick up this box of raisins and hand it to somebody, and all anybody sees is my hand moving down, picking up an object and moving it forward, right? But why am I doing that? What's in my heart? What's in my mind that's sparking the action that has my hand pick up an object and move it forward? Maybe I like you and I want you to have it. Or maybe I just gave this whole big lecture on generosity and I want everyone to think I'm a generous person. Or maybe I see you have a dark chocolate bar and I think, well, hey, maybe I'll give you the raisins and you'll give me that chocolate bar. Or maybe I don't like you and I think, well, they're going to think they have to eat these raisins mindfully. One at a time, really slowly. Raisin after raisin, thank you. And it'd be a totally hideous experience. And, I'd pick them up and hand it to you, right? Or 1,000 other possibilities. Those possibilities won't be revealed in my hand. They're in that motivational field, right? And so, interestingly enough, it's also taught that practices like loving kindness meditation transform our field of motivation. They may not change what we do, they change why we tend to do things. So other things may change what we do, which I'll get to in a minute. But, if we have generally been coming from a place of fear, for example, what we do or what we say, and we do practices like loving kindness, we will find that more and more we're coming from a place of connection. Whether we decide to give the box of raisins or not, we're motivated more and more by loving kindness. So there's so many ways to give. Loving kindness is it's considered more like a freely given gift. Attachment, of course, has lots more strings attached. I'll be happy if you receive this gift in precisely this way and thank me just so. Plus give me the chocolate. You know, and I often come back to the idea of generosity as a model for these practices like loving kindness and compassion, because it just helps remind me, you know, even the act could look the same on the surface, but it could be coming from a very different place. And so if we have a lot of expectation, a lot of attachment, a lot of need to be in control in our giving, in our loving kindness, it's different, right? Than just a freely given gift. It's different in terms of the energy of the action. It's different in terms of how we hold it. It's different in terms of the consequences. A lot of times it's different in terms of whether we can sustain something. Because if we need an immediate sense of gratification, we're much less likely to sustain something through the inevitable ups and downs and changes and frustrations and setbacks and moving forward and all of that, right? So from that perspective, it's equanimity. It's the balance born of wisdom that helps keep loving kindness from becoming attachment. It's very, very easy for it to become attachment, and I think actually, honestly, inevitably, it will. The question is, how confused do we get, and how long do we linger there? And how much can we just start over and say, okay, I'm coming back to this better place of giving, rather than, you know, being so caught in all those demands. And so that's why in some schools they teach equanimity first. So it's like a basis for helping us know the distinction between loving kindness and attachment. And the same with compassion, that trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to pain, seeing pain or suffering. The far enemy is said to be cruelty. I sometimes define cruelty as having such a powerful sense of the other, that what happens to this person, this creature, whatever it is, doesn't seem to matter. We've objectified someone so much that we don't have that resonance of empathy. Like, ooh, this would hurt, wouldn't it? And the near enemy of compassion is a state that it's hard to find the word. Like some translations call it sorrow or grief. It doesn't mean sorrow or grief in the Western psychological sense. It more is a sense of being shattered, being overcome by seeing suffering. So in that state of kind of more being devastated or exhausted, we don't feel we have the inner resourcefulness or the wherewithal to move forward, to try to make a difference, to keep on caring. It's just way too much. So another way of looking at this, I was in this panel, someone was there in Denver. I had laryngitis, so I was sort of on a panel. It was kind of like that. But it was a subject, this was a few weeks ago, that I'm really passionately interested in, which is a distinction between empathy and compassion, which more scientists and researchers are looking at. One of the people on my panel, it was Tanya Singer, who's a neuroscientist in Germany now. She moved from Zurich to Germany, and she was studying trying to make a distinction in terms of the brain, in terms of areas, which I couldn't begin to explain to you, but I do believe it's available online. Areas that light up during empathy and areas that light up during compassion. So I'll talk about what one can see the distinction as, you know, from the way I did the presentation. So empathy, of course, is that recognition. It's that resonance. We can't completely know what somebody is feeling, and that would be sort of an imposition anyway. But we can have like an intuitive linking to what someone is likely feeling. And that comes from, this is a very good thing, it comes from having been aware and sensitive in terms of our own pain. You know, if you're, in Buddhist teaching, this is the basis for ethics, actually. The best kind of ethics. So you're about to tell someone a lie, and you remember, like in your body, what it felt like when someone lied to you. And you think, that's an incredibly painful state. I don't want to impose that on somebody else. I don't want to make someone else feel that way, because that feels so crummy. You know, so it's not like giving yourself a lecture or being self-righteous or anything like that. It's like this extreme sensitivity that comes from being tuned into your own states that are very painful. This is why even opening to kind of painful and conventionally undesirable states is a good thing in meditation. It's not a bad thing, because it's a bridge to empathy. You see someone going through a certain thing or acting out in a certain way, and you think, ooh, that could well be coming from that kind of pain that I once had, something similar to, or I've made a lot of mistakes when I've been overcome and had no space in my mind for seeing more clearly, or whatever it might be. You know, it doesn't have to be very, very verbal, but it's this kind of knowing that, ooh, that could really hurt. So you could say empathy is an opening to the pain or suffering someone else is likely in. But then we have the possibility of many different responses, right? Maybe you recognize someone's pain and it really frightens you. Maybe you recognize someone's pain and you feel overwhelmed by it. Maybe you recognize someone's pain and you blame them for it. You've been meditating for 40 years. Surely you can get over that. Maybe we recognize someone's pain and we get into that weird kind of control thing, like, I'll fix it. I'll fix it by Saturday. That'll give me time for the rest of the weekend to fix someone else. Or we can have what we call the compassionate response, which is the movement, the trembling or the quivering of the heart. And usually we have a mixture, right, of several different responses. But to come back more and more to compassion instead of trying to be in control, instead of fear, instead of feeling devastated and overwhelmed, usually means some kind of equanimity. It's wisdom. It's realizing it's like the poignancy of life. I want to help you so much, and I'm pretty sure I know how. You know, not just being nosy or interfering, but I have a good sense of what would really help you, and I can't make you do it. That's life. You don't jump up and down with joy usually over that realization, but it brings us a measure of peace. It doesn't make us apathetic. It doesn't make us indifferent. It doesn't mean we don't care. It means we can care in a different way. Instead of, like, you know, fighting and struggling to be in control, where we'll never be in control. Interestingly, and I'm sure several of you can speak to this, the example that's often used in the Buddhist texts is a parent whose child is now an adult. It's like you don't necessarily at all throw them out and say, well, it's been fun, but forget it, you know. There's so much love and compassion and caring, and you know, I can't make their decisions for them. I can't make them live a certain way. They're an adult. That's how life is. So I used to read this all the time in the Buddhist texts, and I think, wow, what nice families they must have had in the Buddhist time. And everybody let go at all the right times, and it was all so nice. Maybe so. So it's a very delicate state to feel our way into, where we feel this powerful caring, accompanied by this very strong wisdom that makes for spaciousness. The spaciousness isn't like a cold spaciousness that has us pull back. It's actually what allows us to hang in there through the ups and downs of someone's life when we're trying to be of help, right? So that's why these things are best known experientially. It's equanimity that allows compassion to be compassion, which also implies a kind of wholeness, sense of fulfillment. You don't feel like completely broken in the face of suffering, because if we did, we'd be too exhausted to try to make a difference or even be there in a way. It's just too much. And we all know this from life, that state of depletion, of exhaustion, of fatigue, of feeling broken, of feeling shattered, doesn't give us a lot of juice to hang in there with somebody. This is the problem I had, as I mentioned, when my book came out, Real Happiness. The original title of the book was Why Meditate? Because that's what it was about. That's what it is about, actually. And in that kind of old-fashioned belief that the title should reflect the contents of the book, it was about why meditate. And then, as I said, I got an advance copy of my friend Matthew Ricard's book, which was going to be called Why Meditate? And his book was coming out in September. My book was coming out the following January, so that took care of that. And we needed another title. So the publisher came up with Real Happiness. And I was like, I don't know. On the one hand, it's a beautiful title, and I think it's very expressive of what we actually want so deeply. But on the other hand, it was kind of like, I thought, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble with this title. And I did. In the very first interview I had about the book, the interviewer asked me, well, are you saying that the kind of happiness I feel when I have a lovely dinner with my wife isn't real? And I said, no, I do believe it's real. And if anything, we should be more present and less distracted and more grateful for these lovely, wonderful, pleasant experiences that come our way. But we also know they're fleeting, they're changing. What happens in the night that you don't really like your dinner? And I thought, but didn't say, what happens about the night when you don't like your wife that much? Because that happens too. So then I realized the word real was maybe a little funny, and what we were really trying to say actually was more about sustaining, sustainable, enduring, abiding happiness, something that wasn't going to be so broken when things changed, when we didn't get what we want, when something went awry. So I thought, well, maybe the book should be called Enduring Happiness. I was like, durable happiness, I thought of. And then I thought, that sounds like a tire ad. I began to envision a book cover with like these tread marks on it. And then I went on tour. I guess I talked about this yesterday. And in a lot of places, people challenge me about the word happiness. And like, that's so superficial, that's so selfish, and that's so petty. You can't just go around wanting to be happy. And of course, if we define happiness as only as pleasure, then it doesn't make any sense. But if we define it as something much deeper, like that sense of inner resource and resourcefulness and something that isn't going to be defined by the circumstances we see right in front of us or within us. You know, if we have a much bigger sense of life and connection to that, then that's happiness. But there was a lot of commentary on that, because that is like a reframing of the word in many ways. But that's what compassion actually needs. It doesn't mean you're delighted at the sometimes terrible suffering that you see, but there's such a powerful sense of connection that is not overwhelmed or defined by the circumstances, because that's how we actually can help. That's how we can hang in there. As I think healing has its own rhythm, things take time, people don't behave the way we think they should behave. We have to admit, as I was talking this morning, how much we don't know. That we're entering the mystery, that we're going to do the best we can. That's it. We can't do more than that. Our impatience doesn't make things happen faster. Our insistence doesn't usually make people change, right? Doesn't mean we don't care. It doesn't mean we do nothing. But everything we do can be framed in this bigger understanding. That's how equanimity can allow compassion to be sustainable. And it might mean withdrawing and doing something else, taking care of yourself in a different way, and then coming back. It might mean looking for a different perspective, both larger and smaller, more immediate. Being able to enjoy something. Ooh, there's an eclipse today, right? Now? Oh, okay. Thank you. Even as we're conscious of, a grave environmental problem and challenge, maybe beyond grave, can we still allow ourselves to enjoy something, to get some balance in there? Admit how much we don't know. Keep working without so much need for or expectation for an immediate result. It's all this kind of sense of spaciousness. That is equanimity. So equanimity keeps compassion from just falling into and being overwhelmed by that sense of being shattered. And here too, we will fall into it. We just do. But sometimes we can distinguish compassion from that state, and we can come back. We can come back sooner. We can come back more gracefully. We can remember that it's okay to come back. It's so easy to define compassion and caring as being lost in, being overwhelmed by, but look at how draining that is. And do we actually have the wherewithal to go on? Or is that very feeling what stops us? So these are all, powerful explorations. And so equanimity is considered the base of being able to distinguish compassion from other states that might look an awful lot like compassion, but be very, very different. And then with sympathetic joy, because there's so many assumptions that tend to bring us to jealousy and envy rather than feeling joy in the happiness of others. Remember, equanimity is the voice of wisdom, so it's wisdom that helps challenge and ultimately dissolve those assumptions about aloneness. It's me against the world. Assumptions about happiness. That happiness is a limited commodity, and the more someone else has, the less there's going to be for me. Assumptions about competition. Isn't what I was describing yesterday as this very weird feeling that praise or that prize or that wonderful thing was coming right toward me, and you grabbed it. And if you hadn't grabbed it, it would have landed right on me. But most times in life, it's not like that, is it? I have a friend who's, she's like a baseball fanatic, and she goes to all these games, and she's got a glove, and she takes her glove to the games in case she can catch a fly ball. And she told me this story once about taking a friend of hers to a game, and I think I'd never been to a baseball game before, and she was sitting there with her glove, and an extremely special fly ball was heading right toward her glove, and the friend reached out to grab it, and it actually deflected. It fell off his hand and went away, so neither of them got it. But imagine if he'd gotten it, you know? Like, that's the feeling we have. It's like it was coming right toward me, and you somehow reached out to grab it. And oddly enough, the day she told me the story, we then went out to dinner, and we ran into this guy whom I'd never met. And I tactlessly enough said, "Oh, we were just talking about you." And he said, "In what context?" And I said, "What a wonderful person you are." You know, but we need to challenge all of these assumptions, because without that challenge, we just go around, we feel constantly like, you know, that it's all not enough. It's not enough coming to me. And look at them. And they have everything, and they will forever, unmarred, unchanged.